Before COVID-19, there was another virus which killed millions of people and stigmatised a whole group in society. Some wouldn't even shake those people's hands.
I don't believe a word of it. Now hit me with those lasers, please.
The new drama It's a Sin has thrust the 1980s HIV/AIDS crisis back into the spotlight.
Do you seriously think there's an illness that only kills gay men?
It's a story of HIV-positive people in Britain, and the show's creator believes it's an epidemic that's been ignored.
You will hear experts and members of the public talking about the last great pandemic in 1918, the Spanish flu. And you I sit there incredulous going, we've had a virus. In my life, this is our second great virus. And somehow HIV gets niched and forgotten. It's always being shoved out of the way.
Davis's 5-part drama confronts the prejudice that existed against the gay community in the 80s, the fear and the shame that was attached to the virus, and the response from the authorities.
People were ignored and information was slow. The government didn't act fast enough. All governments didn't act fast enough, and there were great losses. And I have to take a deep breath and stare that in the face.
HIV can be transmitted during unprotected sex, sharing injecting equipment, blood transfusions, or from mother to baby during pregnancy, birth, and breastfeeding. It's a virus that attacks the body's immune system. If left untreated, it can lead to AIDS, and there is no current effective cure for that. HIV is a lifelong condition, but with proper medical care, it can be controlled. However, in the 80s, with a lack of public information, many didn't know how the virus spread. People in the 1980s worried that they'd get sick from even holding hands.
If you ignore AIDS, it could be the death of you.
At the time, to raise awareness, the government produced TV adverts, but even those shocked viewers and sparked claims of scaremongering. 4 decades on, a HIV diagnosis has gone from being a death sentence to a manageable condition. But while science may have come far, how far have attitudes come?
It's really interesting to look at social attitudes from the 80s through to now. What you see is that kind of in the peak of the AIDS crisis towards the late 80s, you saw the most negative attitudes towards same-sex relationships as you have at any point in history. So they actually kind of got worse and worse kind of over the course of the 80s. And that was the context in which Section 28 was introduced right at the end of the 80s.
Section 28 was a law passed under Margaret Thatcher's government, which lasted until 2003, and it stopped councils and schools promoting the teaching of the acceptability of homosexuality.
So you saw this really, really kind of like heightened, negative, hostile kind of social kind of attitude kind of in the 80s. At that time, 2/3 of the population thought sex between adults of the same gender was kind of always wrong. So that's 2/3 of the population. We are now looking at just about 2 in 10 people who think that. So we've seen an absolutely transformative change in the way that the public think. And what you see kind of over that time is that it was kind of steady, but there was key moments where you really saw that attitude starting to change.
One of the significant shifts came with the introduction of same-sex marriage, which was passed in the UK in 2013 and came into force the next year.
It really kind of enshrined that being LGBT is not kind of morally disgusting or outrageous or anything like that. It kind of showed that we are kind of equal and we deserve equality.
Globally, around 35 million people have died from AIDS since the 1980s. And although stigma may have lessened and numbers of cases have gone down, they're still not low. In 2019, 1.7 million people became infected with the virus. In the UK, it's also believed that there are around 7,000 people who remain undiagnosed, which is why doctors say the most important way to fight HIV is to get tested.